When people ask me for advice on writing, I would say, write every day and write a bunch every day. Write a whole bunch every day. I said, that actually is the best way to learn.
Hello, thank you for sitting down with me. I'm Al Toppich from the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and you are Joe Bob Briggs, host of The Last Drive-In. Since you're an Arkansas native, I was wondering if you could talk about your time in Arkansas a little bit.
Yeah, I grew up in Texas and in Arkansas. Calvin Trillin always says, wherever you went to high school, that's where you're from. So I'm from Little Rock because I went to Parkview High School, and I learned to write at the Arkansas Democrat. I mean, it was just called the Democrat at the time. There was no Democrat Gazette. In fact, we were the poor boy in town. The Gazette was the paper with all the money.
Yeah, you guys were like the underdogs almost?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We didn't have near the staff that the Gazette had. Yeah.
And you started at like a young age, right?
I was 13, I think. There was a sports editor at the Democrat named Jack Keedy, and he was there for millions of years. And he would hire young boys as apprentice. I mean, at the time they called it apprentice copy boy. You know, it was hot type and everything. But that's not what it was. What it was is we were expected to write 10 articles a day. And now
that sounds exploitive. Yeah.
I call them articles. I mean, some of them were just 2 paragraphs long. You know, but we're expected to write 10 original things and then go to school, you know, because it was an afternoon. At the time, it was afternoon only paper, and so I would go in before school, work in the sports department, and with a bunch of hard drinking guys. There was a motley crew at the Democrat. I don't know if the Democrat's still at 5th and Scott, but we were in the worst part of the building. We were definitely we were kind of at that time. Sports now is like a huge thing wherever it is. Sports then was more like they called it the toy box, you know, and we were the guys who played in the toy box. It was not considered an important part of the paper.
So do you think you kind of honed your craft at the Democrat?
Yeah, because I went in the first day and, you know, they said, write up these baseball scores. And I was writing them on a notebook, and they said, what are you doing? And I said, writing the baseball scores. And they said, oh no. And the very sort of mean-spirited managing editor came over to me and said, you know, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing it up as I was told. And he says, no, look. And he puts one of those, they had this paper that you put in the typewriter. It's on a roll. It's like an endless roll of paper. And they put it in the typewriter. And he says, you type it directly on there, and then you give it to the assistant sports editor. He marks it up, and it goes upstairs. And I was like, okay, so like I have to think as I do. It's like I didn't understand the concept of thinking and typing at the same time. And so he says, so the very first thing I wrote was, you know, I'm making all these mistakes. And he says, the mistakes don't matter. He's going to mark it up. He's going to mark it up. Don't worry about it. Just type it up and give it to him. You know, and I got the message right away. We want it fast, and we want it, and we want it on this continuous roll of paper. That was a big deal to them. And if you had to use 2 sheets of paper, you took the rubber glue and you pasted the 2 sheets together, so it became 1 sheet of paper. Because any article, no matter how long, was on 1 sheet of paper. Because I guess the linotype guys that did the hot type, you know, I guess they just wanted this paper to go by as they do their, you know, most people today have never seen a linotype.
Yes, this is all fascinating to me.
Or a linotype operator. But at the time, it was these, working class guys that just knew how to set hot type, and you had to do whatever they wanted. But the newspapers everywhere, but especially at the Democrat, because it had thin walls and thin floors, were monstrously noisy. I mean, you could hear the presses running, and I guess they were like 2 floors above us, and there was just constant noise, and you had to yell. Everybody had to yell. So newsrooms were these like raucous places. The first time I ever saw a quiet newsroom was when I saw the movie All the President's Men. I said, what kind of newsroom is that? It's like no one has to yell in the newsroom at the Washington Post. Where are their presses? How do they do it? That was my initiation into writing, is that you write it fast and you write a lot. And actually, when people ask me for advice on writing, I would say, write every day and write a bunch every day. Write a whole bunch every day. I said that actually is the best way to learn. It's like don't treat it like it's, people always say, I have to wait till I get an idea. It's like, no, you don't. It's like, because have you ever said anything like that at the Arkansas Democrat when I was there? They would say, you're fired, get out of here, go home. And we had a lot of guys who came through there who would, you'd send them out to cover the high school football game, and they wouldn't really know how to get there. Tell them how to get to Jacksonville or whatever, and we would never see them again. And if they made it back, they had a job, But
sounds kind of perilous.
And when Fred Morrow became the sports editor, I would say, Fred, is that guy working for us or he's not working for us? And he'd say, well, he says, I'm going to give him a tryout because when he came in, I think he's my shirt size. And it's like, okay. And the other thing about sports writing at that time was they really rewarded humor and they rewarded invention. Sports today has become very much about statistics and sort of analytic, very super analytical. Sports writing at that time was, they wanted you to be a great storyteller. They sort of encouraged you to exaggerate. And you had to exaggerate if you worked there on Saturday night, because a lot of times we were, if the Travelers were playing in Shreveport, we didn't have the money to go down there. And so we're listening to the radio broadcast, which I found out later, the radio guy was taking it off the teletype. And so he wasn't watching the game either, but we thought he was watching the game. And so we would listen to the radio, we were right, keep score. And then we knew what all the ballparks looked like. And so we could say, in the third inning, Jennings bounced it off the ice house it's just over the left field fence, and or just make up something, and they encouraged you to do that, so that on Sunday morning we would have what looked like we'd been in Shreveport and covered the game. I mean, it wasn't anything untrue in the article. Well, actually there was, because we would say, he fumbled a sharp grounder. Well, we didn't know if it was a sharp grounder. It was a grounder, and he fumbled it. We knew that there was an error on the play, We didn't know whether it was an error with a pop fly or a grounder or whatever. You know, E4. We just knew it was an E4, and so you have to say, you know, yeah, the rally started in the 6th inning with when you know, Smith fumbled an easy. Sometimes we'd say fumbled an easy grounder, you know, or something, make him look bad. So, yeah. But you know, they were very. Like every once in a while, they would let me cover an out-of-town baseball game, if it was in Memphis. But if it was in El Paso, no way in hell, you know. But that was an education. It was an education about writing, about newspapers, about drinking, about poker, about, you know, it's like, because I was the kid. I was the kid, and there were all these, like, you know, hard drinking guys. All of them, as a rule, they were very funny guys. They were like, they had senses of humor, and so I loved it. I was a 13-year-old kid. You know, what was I in 7th grade maybe? And I worked there until I went to college. And when I went to college, they were like, "Wow, he's going to college." Because at that time, most newspaper reporters didn't go to college. I mean, if you would come out of high school and become a police reporter and just, you know, work until you moved up at the company. And so I forget his name now, but the guy that wrote Shaft, the guy that wrote the screenplay for Shaft, he was I think he had an 8th grade education, but he had been a beat reporter in Cleveland, and then he was so good that he got hired as a police reporter in New York, and then he became, and this would never happen today, he became editor of the New York Times Sunday magazine. You know, you would not have anybody today with an 8th grade education editing the New York Times Sunday magazine. So at the time, it was like, it was the end of an era. It was the end of the front page era. It was highly competitive between the Democrat and the Gazette. So the Gazette had all the cards. They had all the money. They actually had people at the games. They had people who were, you know, on Friday night, they would have all the high school football games. Now we had till Saturday morning to get all the high school football games, so we could steal some of them from the Gazette. So part of what they trained you to do is take a 4-paragraph Gazette article and turn it into a 4-paragraph Democrat article without anybody knowing. You know, you rearrange facts, you rearrange phrasing, you rearrange everything so that it's basically the same information, but it looks like, and I was great at that. I got so much credit for, you know, hey, we don't have the, and sometimes it'd be like major teams. You know, we don't have the Jonesboro game, we don't have the Fort Smith game. And we were like, why don't we have it? And it's like, you know, the coach was supposed to call us, he didn't call. Well, it just means he lost the game. You know, it's like, I'll call the other coach. You know, so we'd call the winning coach, you know, "Coach, what happened?" And some of these coaches were so dumb that they were just like, "Yeah, we lost, we won the game 21-17. Okay. How'd you score those touchdowns?" "Well, Wilkins scored one, Thompson scored one." "Coach, can you elaborate just a little bit? Was there a long drive? Was there, you know, trying to get this information out of an Arkansas small high school football coach was like pulling teeth. It was like horrible. And they didn't really want to talk to you in the first place. And so, but you know, but it was like, no, get the story, get the story, get the story, get the story. They would not take no for an answer. If your assignment was get the Fort Worth game, get it on paper, you got the Fort Worth game on paper. So one way or another, you got the Fort Worth game on paper. You called the coach, you stole it from the Gazette, or you did something else, but you got it on paper. But you couldn't steal stuff on Saturday night because both papers came out on Sunday morning. And so on Saturday night, you had to be really enterprising. And we hated it when you had an extra inning baseball game on Saturday night or something like that. And they're actually holding the paper to put the score in. And so you write the story of the game two ways: winning story, losing story. And so you're starting with the first inning, and you're putting all the innings one on top of each other, and then when you finally get the winning hit or whatever, you write some flashy lead, and you hope that it all makes sense, and you just send it to type, and it goes into type, and you never see it again. The whole experience was sort of like what they always say about, you don't really want to see how something is made, because but once you're in it, and it's sort of like learning to be a pilot. The first thing they teach you is when you're going to land, you are going to put those wheels down on the ground. Once you start the landing, you are going to finish that land. You are going to, no matter what's happening to your plane, you're putting those wheels on the ground. And it's like, that's the way they were about a story at the Democrat. It's like, you are going to get this story. And they would send me, I also occasionally worked outside of sports, and they would send me to do stuff like, KKK is having a meeting, is having a rally. And I don't know what KKK rallies are like today, really, but at the time, it would be, one guy from Waldron and one guy from West Memphis and one guy from El Dorado, and maybe one guy from Springdale or something, and then three guys from places that are so obscure you've never heard of them, and these 7 guys would be on the Capitol grounds making a speech that with no audience. I would be the audience, and I would even say, yes, the KKK was there. Nobody else was there. I said, well, write it up anyway. Write it up. And I said, I can't write it up because none of it made sense. I mean, it's like, I don't really know what they were ultimately talking about. And I said, so you just write it up like, the Arkansas Ku Klux Klan chapter, had a rally at, they would go on the Capitol grounds. Had a rally on the Capitol grounds and protested the integration of schools in wherever, and it would be something like that. And it would be 2 paragraphs, and they put it on the spike, and maybe they would run it, maybe they wouldn't. And so they would send me out on stuff like that they considered things that didn't matter. And one of the things that didn't matter was KKK meetings.